We're live.
Hello, my name is Alexander Randalls, and today we are in Arlington, Virginia for the first out of many presidential debates. We have former Secretary of Labor Davy Long and Senate Minority Leader Rob Sanders. How today's rules will work is you will both have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Davy will go first, and Rob Sanders will go second. Once we move on to the questions, you will both have 1 minute to complete it. You have 1 minute. I will warn you I'll warn you when 30 seconds and then 5 seconds. Do you understand? So
That works.
all right. So Davy Long, you have the first opening statement.
Thank you for hosting this debate, Matthew. And thank you for Cambridge Broadcasting for having us here today. And thank you for the great people of Arlington, Virginia for giving us me and Robert, an amazing welcome. A while ago, when I was considering a run for president, I said, people want change. They want something they can believe in. So I say, let's give them something to believe in. Let's put America first and make every man a king. Right now, with our establishment, we're not going to be able to make that happen. Only if we elect new leadership will we make the change that we need. That person is me. Throughout my career as Senate Majority Whip and Secretary of Labor, I have fought for America's interests and her working class. And while I might not agree with everyone on everything, we both understand that we need to put America first and make every man a king. We all know the current political establishment has failed its promise to bring change to America. We've been sold a false idea that neoliberal policies and neoliberal politicians are the solution to all our problems. I have a different approach. I support labor unions. I support compassionate capitalism.
30 seconds.
I understand that compromise is good for a democracy. So that is why I'm proud to join this presidential race. Will we have an America where we have free market competition and compassion and a strong safety net for the poor and the needy? We will have an America that does that, and we will make every man a king. That is why I am asking you to cast your vote for Davy P. Long. I hope you enjoy this debate. Thank you.
All right. Time is up. Robert Sanders, it is now your turn for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Secretary Long, for this debate. I want to thank the American people for letting me and Mr. Long participate in this greatest of honors, which is running for the presidency. We need to bring back the firebrand leadership that steered this country to greatness. We need someone willing to take a stand, face to face, with an oligopoly that has its tentacles in every corner of the market. It's keeping regular, ordinary people from benefiting from this system. It's time the American people had someone in the White House again, not the American corporation or industry baron, as has been the case for 40-some-odd years. It's time we listen to the American people. Their pain must be heard and acknowledged. Their suffering must be heard and acknowledged. The suffering of their children must be heard and acknowledged. The fact of the matter is, we live in a society. We all participate together in this nation. It is our obligation to ensure an open market in which everyone can participate and no one is locked out of. But if we don't have the courage to take on the established interests that have driven this country full speed off a cliff, then we near ensure the totalitarian takeover of this country by those with a concentrated amount of power, and will find ourselves complicit in that takeover. I will not be complicit, nor will I disconnect myself from the moral center which has driven this nation and others for centuries. In this debate, I will articulate a policy of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone in this country. And by the end, I hope I will have earned your support for the highest office in our land. Thank you all very much.
All right. So now we do have some questions. As I already explained the rules for the question, I will be listing off the ones I have acquired. This one is Robert Sanders. The Democratic Party has been well known since the early 60s to be a liberal party. The left-wing liberal policies have been a key role in the party for over 60 years. Mr. Sanders, are you a conservative and a former Republican? What will you bring to the White House as a conservative Democrat?
Well, first of all, there have been liberal elements of the Democratic Party for the last 40 years. 50, if you want to count a majority of the party, 40 as leadership. What I have championed and what my candidacy represents in the nomination of the Democratic Party and for the country as a whole is a return to the roots, the core principles of what has built our country, our economy, and the Democratic Party. And hopefully, and I believe Mr. Long agrees with this,
30 seconds.
He will do the same for the Republican Party. What I'll do in the White House is champion the exact same ideals that I championed as Senate Majority Leader of the Senate GOP and as an independent, not in political office. Infrastructure for everyone in this country, an open and free market, a strong foreign policy which imposes America's standing as the leader of the world once and for all, keeping China and others out of that position. I have the experience and the record to show the work I've done, the work I will do, and the work I will continue to always do in the White House as someone who agrees with the liberty-minded, conservative mindset of ensuring life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone in this country, and the return to God. That, to me, is true conservatism. That, to me, is true democratic values, and I would like to see the Democratic Party finally meet what it should have met in the election of Teddy Roosevelt and connect itself to those values, connect itself to the values of the bull moose, the values of true progressivism in that stopping the oligopoly from having control of the market. Having control of the market stops other people from participating in what should be a free market. I am a true believer in a free market and will do everything in my power as president to ensure the reality of a free market in this country.
All right. Mr. Long, you have the option of a rebuttal.
The Republican Party, for far too long, has stood for the interests of military weapons manufacturers, of oil companies, and of international banks. But it wasn't always the case. The Republican Party was once home to populist and nationalist giants such as Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and so many others.
5 seconds.
And if you look at the results of the Republican primary, we now know that there is a new creed for the Republican Party. And that is America first and every man a king. If you look at my record as Senate Majority Whip a while ago and as Secretary of Labor, I have spent my career Wait, can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. I have spent my career as a champion for the American. Wait, could you guys hear me like 10 seconds ago?
Can.
I didn't cut out. Okay, my bad. Okay. And a champion for the American worker. Look at the pieces of legislation that I have proposed. I have been a champion for the American worker. And so this Republican Party that I am leading now is running on a crusade to take back America for the American people. Again, like I said, the Republican Party is no longer controlled by the oil companies, no longer controlled by the weapons manufacturers, no longer controlled by the international banks. We have returned to our roots of economic and social nationalism and populism. And that's what we're going to bring to the White House and to the government on Election Day.
All right.
Well, if I could respond to that. First of all, I don't think, and I wouldn't say, having worked with Senators Romney, Senators Evans, that those two and others are working for the oil industry or working for for-profit industries across the country, which are the oligopolies, which I have railed against as leader of that caucus. Excuse me. They wouldn't have voted for me as leader of the caucus if that had been the case, and I think it's too easy for us to rail against personality politics, which I have done, while not offering the correct solutions. And I find it quite distressing when we have a situation in which so-called America First conservatism is being labeled under the guise of distributism. I don't think the government preserving or storing surplus goods of individual farmers is good policy. That, to me, sounds like something the Soviets would have done, but that's in your platform. And other things like that are in your platform. We're just going to straight up steal from farmers? That's not conservatism. That's not a return to liberty. That's not protecting the American worker. That is expansion of the government. That's an expansion of the bureaucracy. Under my candidacy, a true conservative leadership, under a new Democratic Party which has returned to the roots and principles of this nation, we will see a return to a true, open, and free market in which the government is there not as a bloated bureaucracy in which we have to fund a bureaucracy with hundreds of thousands of employees overseeing a surplus of our agricultural goods or other goods in the state, but instead a government which supports and aids a free market as a guiding hand instead of a nanny state. I think Mr. Long has good intentions, and as he stated in the beginning, our core principles are the same. But if the American people are looking for a serious president, someone who is ready to take on these big money interests in a serious way, they need someone who is ready for real solutions, honest solutions, sensible and logical solutions that decrease an already bloated bureaucracy in the federal government and deal with the core fundamental issues in a not free market controlled by a few oligarchs in this country. It's great that Mr. Long wants to do this, but I think the American people quite clearly see who the real person is to get this done.
I'd like to rebuttal.
Permission denied.
Robert Sanders says that he has sensible policies, so many policies.
Davy?
I'd like to know what those policies are, because unlike his campaign, my campaign actually has a platform, and I'm very glad that he read the platform. It's very good that he reads. And in that platform it says, to balance agricultural production, the government would preserve or store surplus goods. That's correct, and Robert did read that. But it says, abolishing the practice of destroying surplus food. Farmers know this, and farmers admit it, that they destroy a lot of the surplus food. So what my plan is this. Instead of destroying surplus food that's going to be destroyed anyways, the government takes it from the farmers, because the farmers don't want it, because they're not going to sell it, and we preserve it. And so when we can do things with it, we can preserve it, we can give it to people that need it, we can give it to our military. And this isn't stealing, it was going to be destroyed. So if Robert would have read in the next sentence, he would have known that.
I read that
but
sentence,
also, we would
Mr.
know.
Long. I read that sentence, Mr.
And
Long.
you would have known what it meant if you really read it. If you really looked at it.
No interrupting, please.
I think it's just a conversation between two people, actually. But, Mr. Long,
My time.
Mr. Long,
My time.
first of all,
You had a platform. We know
Mr.
very well what your policies
Long,
are.
you
So much about the policies.
Mr.
If you had a
Long.
platform, we'd know what they are. Very clear. But we don't. We don't. Because I don't think anyone
Mr.
knows.
Long, instead of engaging in cheap shots like that,
I don't think anyone knows.
instead of engaging,
What is it? What's the policies? I have
Are
the
you gonna-
policies,
are you gonna
and every
continue- are you
speech of
gonna-
mine, it's been
are you
very
gonna continue to
crystal
badger?
clear.
Are you going to continue to badger, or are you going to let
Very crystal
me
clear on what we
answer
stand for.
the question?
Sure, answer
I
the
don't
question.
think the people of the United States want a president who badgers, first of all. Second of all, I don't think...
They want a president who's honest.
What have I been dishonest about?
About the policy. You didn't finish reading it. It says agricultural products
If you
that
let
they're
me
going to
finish,
destroy anyway.
if you let me finish.
If I may.
Yeah, okay, go on.
First of all,
Robert,
no, Mr. Miller, I'm gonna talk. Thank you very much, Mr. Long.
this is a debate. This isn't a
This
conversation between
is a
two.
conversation. The American people want to hear our policies. Mr. Long, first of all, the agricultural thing, I did read that. You're talking about the government distributing food to people using the surplus goods of individual farmers. You might as well nationalize the farms. Mr. Long, that's
Wrong.
not good policy. Mr. Long, it is. That is exactly
No.
what you're talking about. It's essentially
Not what it says.
It's essentially red lines. It doesn't matter what it says, Mr. Long. The policy in practice.
It's not what it would do.
The policy
Not what
in
it would do.
practice. The policy in practice. Let me talk. Stop moaning. Stop moaning. The
That's so wrong. I said so.
You're moaning and mumbling. You're moaning and mumbling.
So wrong.
You're moaning and mumbling. The policy is inherently breadlines. Inherently, all right. When the government,
It's not really
you
about-
are proposing.
The policy is
Again,
What the
Mr.
policy
Long,
is.
Secretary Long.
Do
you're
you
gonna let me
think
speak.
that it's an
Secretary Long?
efficient system where you have
Secretary Long, I am a senator.
so much food
You
destroyed
can't.
every
You're not
year?
going to be
Both
able
of
to
you.
do
support
this to
that.
me, Senator. I am a senator. You're not going to be able to outspeak me. Your policy is.
I'm a Secretary of Labor. The most important.
First of all, I can't even articulate my policy because you're moaning and mumbling when I'm just
Both
trying
of
to
you.
address
So
the
wrong.
policy.
So
Second
wrong.
of all, the policy you are trying to implement is inherently a policy of the government taking surplus food from individual farmers, which have the utmost right to destroy their surplus crop if they choose, and then deciding where that food goes instead of dealing with the systemic issue of people not having enough capital, to get food.
Robert Sanders, Davy Long, both of you.
Why would we
Both
as
of
the,
you.
I want you to answer this question,
My
Davy Long.
Senate Minority Leader,
why
Rob
would we
Sanders.
as the government not
Sir.
address the fundamental issue of people not having the capital to get food and deal with the food crisis instead of
so many plans to do that.
instead of
That will-
stealing
Davy
the
Long,
crop, instead
Robert
of
Sanders,
stealing the
both of you.
crop from the American people,
Well, let's
from
listen to
the
the moderator,
American
Robert.
from
Robert, let's
the
listen to the
American
moderator.
farmer, and then finally,
Senate Minority Leader
the
Robert
moderator.
Sanders.
food out to
Great
people.
idea. It's
That
called
is
listening
not
to the
smart governance.
moderator.
Both of you, be quiet. Okay, listen. From now on,
I'm a
what the-
moderator.
from now on, we will no interrupting, please. Now, I'm going to get on to the next question. So, do not jump down each other's throats. This question is for Mr. Long. Mr. Long, you are a populist conservative, similar to former President Donald J. Trump, but it seems the people of your party are concerned with your more liberal take with healthcare and economics. Can you explain your plan with a liberal take on healthcare and economics? If so, explain how it will work. You have 1 minute, and there will be a 30-second rebuttal if Robert Sanders wants to.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I would say this is not a liberal plan. This is a nationalist and a populist plan. And I'd like to put a disclaimer. In no way, and I think me and Robert agree on this, it's not going to be Medicare for all under any of our plans. Medicare for all is not on the table. It's not a policy proposal that anyone supports. No one wants it. And it's not going to be done. What we're doing is, my health care plan is we were looking at Bryant Care, and there are several things that we can look at. One is making it so that healthcare expenses are tax deductible. We can't be taxing the American people for the income they spend on their health. That's unacceptable. And we will make it so that healthcare costs are tax deductible when you pay with your income. Or possibly we could even do health insurance costs are tax deductible. Secondly, I think in other countries do this where they have it where healthcare providers and health insurance providers are non-for-profit businesses. I think we can look into it. We need to look at the effects that it would have, make sure that they would still be able to stay afloat operating on this model. But I think that's something we can look into that'd still be private. Everything's still going to be very private. And we'll have capitalism for it. We have to have capitalism. But we need to be looking at this. What can we do to make, and this is a nationalist proposal, what can we do to make healthcare affordable and accessible for every American? And whatever does that, that's what I support. But the policies I listed, I think they'll do a very good job of doing it.
All right.
So,
You have
I do.
a 30-second rebuttal?
And as moderator, I've gotten multiple requests. The rebuttal time will be increased to 58 seconds to a minute, but interruptions will not be allowed. If you are to interrupt, your mics will be turned off. Are we clear?
We're so clear,
Mr.
so clear.
Long, I have to say, in terms of healthcare, it's very clear what the problem is, and any of the American people know what the issue is. They are inundated with choice. Inundated with choice backed by government funds. What are insurance companies going to do when we pass what are insurance companies supposed to do when we pass subsidies for them, other than rise prices, other than rise premium prices? It's just business. It's just making a profit. The government has to get out of healthcare, period. As soon as the government got into healthcare, as soon as we started to address these healthcare crises as a government, as is the issue with many things the government tries to do, we saw an increase in healthcare premiums for those employer-based insurance prices. Once Medicare got in there, insurance-based premiums went up. Once Medicaid got in there, insurance-based premiums went up. Once the Affordable Care Act got in there, insurance premiums went up. What is the logical solution there? It's stop passing public healthcare insurance programs. Let the free market and competition drive those prices down, as was the case beforehand. Now, does that mean the government leaves safety net hospitals and actual health care, not health insurance, health care, off the table? No, the government can subsidize through tax benefits, through tax incentives, which, if you look at the 11 12-page record the 12 legislation I passed in the 2 weeks I was in the Senate. You can see that tax incentives working for the infrastructure programs, for the housing programs, which actually deal with poverty directly. Those are the real solutions to the healthcare crisis that we face. Tax incentives for those safety net hospitals in the country, which are dealing with the bulk of the frontline healthcare crisis in this country. Other than that, we risk increasing healthcare premiums, increasing costs, and increasing the quality of care. Mr. Long's proposal of supporting a two-tier healthcare system or the government intervening in some way in healthcare insurance, that is not, again, a sensible solution for good governance. That will, again, drive up prices no matter what he says, no matter what politicians speak he does. That will drive up prices. The American people know this firsthand, and if we as a society allow ourselves to continue to pass ill thought out public health care insurance programs, we will continue to see healthcare costs per capita rise and be greater than any country on the face of the planet. Public healthcare does not work. It's too bulky of a system for the government to take on. As I said, and as should be the guiding principle of our government, the federal government should be a guiding hand for the free market, allowing the infrastructure and the foundation to take place for individuals and the market to take control of these utmost important parts of our society: healthcare, infrastructure, etc., etc. And if you look at my extensive legislative record in the 2 weeks that I was in Senate leadership, you can see the beginning of that foundation. I'm running for president to solidify that foundation in this nation, and the American people know exactly which candidate is the one to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Senate Minority Leader. We shall now move on.
I would like to rebuttal. I think I deserve a rebuttal.
15 seconds to rebuttal.
30, but okay, we'll do 15.
Well, because I just
Robert Sanders knows that that's simply not true. My proposals would not increase the cost of health insurance, and I understand that when you have insurance through the workplace, that causes problems. When you have government takeover of health insurance and healthcare, that causes problems. What my two plans are is this. We make it so that you are not taxed for the money that you spend for health care expenses or tax deductible. Okay? Very simple. And it wouldn't increase prices. There's no reason it would increase prices. The second thing is making it so that we'll look into it to see what the effects are, but it works in other countries where healthcare providers and health insurance companies become non-for-profits. It would decrease prices. It's decreased prices in those countries. It's not government regulation. It's making it so that our model of healthcare is that we're not profiting off of healthcare. That would 100% decrease prices. And you know this, Robert. You know this. You're not saying it up here. 'Cause you're just not. But you know it very well. And it just makes sense. If it's not a profit-based, when you make healthcare, and you make it's about serving the American people. This is a nationalist proposal. You're making it about serving the American worker. It will not increase prices, and it's not socialism. I know you really like throwing these buzzwords around now.
Did I say socialism?
We don't do that. It's not socialism whatsoever. Other countries have it. Our NATO allies are not socialist, okay?
Now you are close to a minute. It is time to move on to the next question.
Hold on, can I get a response? He attacked me.
It's almost like he's running under the Libertarian Party. It's very sad.
He attacked me directly.
Mr. Long.
He attacked me directly, Mr. Cheney.
Please, Mr. Minority Leader, you will have 10 seconds to please make it.
I'm going to speak a little longer than 10 seconds. First of all, Mr. Long knows exactly that will increase prices. And to say that that's not... To say that that's not government regulation is just wrong. Government mandate that health insurance companies, which right now are for profit, would have to become non-profit is inherently regulation. Inherently, that would take some kind of bureaucracy under the Department of Health and Human Services, directed by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to get it done. That's the only way you could get something like that done. The transition itself would take bureaucracy. The implementation itself would take bureaucracy. The continuation of that implementation, the enforcement of said implementation would take bureaucracy. Mr. Long, I am not calling you a socialist. I know that you're a distributist. I know that inherently you're a capitalist. I know you don't not believe in the profit motive for a lot of things in our market, but unfortunately, I think you're taking the wrong approach to a lot of the situations that we face here in this country. Those policies inherently will increase government regulation, increase the bureaucracy. If you look at any of the pieces of legislation I wrote, any of the 12 pieces of legislation I wrote, including the foreign affairs legislation, none of it increases the bureaucracy of any of the administrative processes we have in the country now. None of it increases the employees of any department that we have in the country now. That is good governance. We have an already bloated bureaucracy that needs to be addressed and gutted. As president, I will gut that bureaucracy using the power of the executive and get it done in a smart and sensible way. Mr. Long, accusing me of calling you a socialist on this stage is just not true. I am not throwing around names and labels. Anyone listening to this debate knows that. They know that I'm offering a sensible critique of what is distributism, which is not the America First capitalist system that you're pitching it to be.
Thank you, Mr. Long and Mr. Sanders. We shall now move on to...
No, I would like to... I was invoked. I'd like a very quick rebuttal, please. Very quick.
So, Mr. Long, we've already spent multiple minutes on this, and we have to move on.
So sad. So sad.
I both let you have multiple rebuttals, and I cannot let it go any longer. We are now going to move on to the topic of firearms. Firearms in America have been a prominent issue since the Constitution was written in the late 1780s. We're going to start with Mr. Long, as we have. Mr. Long, do you believe that an American citizen has the right to own a fully automatic or assault rifle with the proper training, and they obtain it in the legal process of the United States? Or are you against the owning of firearms such as AK-47s, AR-15s, or Mac 11s?
Thank you for the question. I am 100% pro Second Amendment. I am a Second Amendment candidate. I believe Robert Sanders is also. I think we're both Second Amendment candidates, which I think this will be a very calm part of the debate. The Supreme Court ruled some time ago that firearms that are commonly owned by the American people and that are currently legal at that time were constitutionally protected under the Second Amendment. And so that 100% includes AR-15s. And an assault rifle ban on semi-automatic rifles, a ban on ownership of those, would in fact be a violation of the Second Amendment. Very clearly, the Supreme Court, no one denies that. When you were talking about AK-47s and other machine guns, the Supreme Court did rule that the government has the right to regulate those. I would say, personally, that if you're a law-abiding citizen, you have your Second Amendment rights. And that's how it is. That's what the Supreme Court ruled, and that's my personal beliefs, and that is the long-held beliefs of the Republican Party.
I'd like to talk about why we have the Second Amendment. Why we have that belief. Why did the Founding Fathers put that so important amendment second? It's because they knew that people with People drunk on power, people in personality politics, once party over nation, position over the people becomes the norm in American politics, the government can and will become a totalitarian, tyrannical state, as I talked about in my opening statement, and we are seeing the bleed of that happen today. We are seeing American jobs shipped away. We are seeing American culture stripped piece by piece, strand by strand, from our schools, our media, our entertainment, Hollywood, etc. This is a cultural crisis, and the fact that gun control is even in the conversation should prove that cultural crisis. If I'm elected President of the United States, the people can be sure and rest assured that they have an advocate who will oppose that corporate tyranny once and for all, ensuring the enshrined right of every American to have a weapon to protect themselves, their family, and their communities from a tyrannical government which wishes to strip that community of its market, strip that family of its culture, or any of the horrible things that we have seen happen in history. We've become too comfortable as a people, and it's time we wake ourselves up to the realities of the situation we find ourselves in. And if we want to deal with the gun violence crisis, black on black crime, school shootings, the reason that this gun control topic is in the debate now, we have to deal with the drug crisis, which is legislation which I have started to deal with in the Senate, passing the Crush the Cartels Act, which deals directly with the cartel issue and the drug crisis. We have to deal with the mental health crisis in our education schools and our education facilities. It's not just about mental health and increasing mental health facilities and subsidizing mental health and spending money on mental health. It's about dealing with an education system which forces students to be stressed out, feel alone, feel individual. It's about dealing with an education system which isn't truly instilling a sense of education in people, but is instead hammering them to be workers for a corporate state. That cultural issue, that stripping away of the culture, if we can deal with that core fundamental issue, we can start to address the core fundamental depression that is finding itself in our country.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. You may have a 1-minute rebuttal, Mr. Long.
Yes, thank you. I don't disagree really with anything that Robert said, but I just wanted to say, by advocating for gun control, you are also hurting the American worker who doesn't always have the time with working multiple jobs to apply for licenses or pay for fees or go through training. And this is horrible since people need guns to defend themselves. And if you look at the numbers, we love looking at the numbers, rifles as a whole kill around 300 people per year, which is roughly the same as toaster-related deaths, and is less than people who've been killed with hands and feet, less than knives, and far less than people killed with bats and clubs. Simply, if we want to talk about crime, we want to talk about gun violence, we got to look at the gangs. We have to look at the gangs. But stripping people's constitutional rights and their cultural heritage will not solve the problem whatsoever.
I'm glad you agree with my position.
Both in agreement on this very important issue.
Except the difference is you stole.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah,
we are now moving right into the next topic. Thank you both, gentlemen, for keeping this clean, and I'm very proud that we both have come to an agreement. All right. Mr. Long. Hold on. Real quick. Sorry, someone was messaging me. Alright, gentlemen. We are now moving on into the next topic. This is very similar to the topic after this. Mr. Law, you have been very clear that you are strongly against people who have over $600 million, aka billionaires. Will you implement these views into your administration? And the reason why we're asking is because the Republicans are worried this is almost a socialist position or a far left progressive. Can you tell the American people your true position on this and if you will implement this into your administration?
Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say, to start off with, I have been in very close talks with the GOP leadership, and I'd like to say a lot of people in Republican leadership are supporting this campaign. They've read the platform and they're supporting this campaign. The second thing is this. I said on an interview on Cambridge Broadcasting, I believe, a while ago, is that this is a belief that I hold. I just do not see the efficiency system that allows this to happen, and I would not be opposed to seeing my plan implemented. However, I did say this, because you have to be realistic in politics sometimes with stuff like this, is that if the American people do not want this, and if the Republicans or people in Congress do not want this, I'm not going to go over the bounds of what a president can do to get something like this done. And so this is a personal belief of mine that I just do not see the efficiency behind a system with so much concentrated wealth. I believe that has led to the political situation that we have, where it's serving the established interests in this country and not to the American people and the American worker and America's interests. However, we will work with people to get things done, and we will build national consensus. That's really what this campaign is about. So, thank you for the question.
If you wish to rebuttal Mr. Senator earlier, you will have a minute.
Folks, I don't see how, and I articulated this when we were talking about agriculture and got into that spat. Look, I am now a Democrat. I told the Democratic Party in the beginning, and I stood on the Democratic stage, and I advocated for the exact things I'm advocating here today. I advocated for liberty. I advocated for an open and free market. Never did I stand on the debate stage and advocate for distribution of the wealth in this country. That, to me, is an absurd proposal that has never worked in any country ever across the world. Not allowing a person to accumulate more personal net worth than the average family fortune? In what country does that support the incentive towards building the things that Mr. Musk has built? In what country does that support building the things that Mr. Gates has built, or any of these entrepreneurs which started out in their garage? It doesn't. It just doesn't. The same thing with the agricultural policies. Taking away an individual farmer's crop for the government to then distribute it to people who don't have food, instead of dealing with the fundamental issue of those people aren't in jobs which pay enough. Those people don't have access to a market in which they can pursue their entrepreneurial ability and then get money to feed their own family. The government should not be there as a nanny state for people. I don't doubt that Mr. Long has good intentions, and I've said this over and over again, but if the people, the American people, I'm not talking about Republican Party leadership who would like to see the Republicans hold the White House because they like to see a little R next to the name on the ballot. I'm talking about true, honest, principled change towards a liberty-centric market for everyone in this country. My Vice President, Senator Cooley, and I have fought extremely hard in the United States Senate for this reality. I've passed 12 pieces of legislation to get this done, building a foundation towards this. As president, I will pass many more pieces of legislation. I got all that done in 2 weeks. With 8 weeks as president, I will have so much more time, so much more political capital to actually get these principles implemented, and I won't be capitulating my principles or stopping any principles because, they're not popular enough. And I think it's quite sad that we have a situation in which distributism is at the top of the Republican Party. And I will respond directly to something Mr. Long said about passing those policies. Those policies, yes, will never pass the Congress, but the American people will have the final say on whether or not those policies are what they want in the White House, and they will tell the American people they will tell the country whether or not they want those policies in the White House next Friday.
You know, that's interesting, but your own mate doesn't have any serious opposition to my plans. When I was going around asking people for their support before I knew that Senator Cooley was going to be your running mate, he brought up the plan to me, and I told him the same thing I said at the debate, and he said, you know, it's not really that I oppose the economic aspects of what you're saying. It's just you didn't say too much on social issues, we had that conversation, and we ended up, obviously ended up joining your ticket. But he had no problem with the economic proposals. He asked me, Secretary, how do you plan to make this efficient? And I told him how. I quoted, actually from Huey Long's own book that he wrote. I quoted some stuff from it. It was a very pleasant conversation. But your own running mate had no opposition to my plan. And he said he liked it, kind of. And really, we look at this very closely. Who is running against the vested, established interests in this country? Because that's what this election is about. And that's why you're running, Robert. That's what you've said, that we're running against the oligarchy that is controlling this country. But when you don't want to break up the oligarchy that's controlling this country, you're not going to be liberating America from the oligarchy. So we have to have someone who has been consistent, whose campaign is consistent with their values. And my values is this: nationalism, common good capitalism, and America first. Nationalism, Senator, nationalism doesn't involve we all do our own separate things and we, cut all the healthcare and cut all the welfare. That's nationalism is about looking out for the common good above all things. That's what this campaign is about.
Don't gaslight the American people. Don't gaslight the American people, Secretary Long. Hold on, Mr. Cheney. Don't gaslight the American people, Mr. Long. I never said anything along those lines. And first of all, I articulated, and the American people will go back on the tape, and they were listening here. We got 6 people listening here, and people will go back on the tape later tonight. I articulated in my rebuttal a clear and concise response as to why distributism is not true liberty, and you went on to attack my vice president, saying he disagreed with the agenda that I put forth, as if we hadn't been talking about this since the very beginning in the Senate, as if you can't go back to Senate sessions on this very channel, DES-CBS, and see us advocating for those things. It's simply not true. And you could have engaged in a rebuttal as to why distributism and distributing the wealth deals with the oligarchy instead of antitrust, instead of a Teddy Roosevelt style leadership in which we can break up the big banks, deal with the Wall Street crisis, deal with crisis in which regular people are locked out of a stock market, regular people are locked out of an entrepreneurial market. Those are the fundamental issues in this debate, and I'll say this again because I just did it again. I articulated a clear and logical response as to why distributism isn't good. You responded saying something about my vice president, a private conversation you had, leaking a private conversation, which is not very ethical, which, I don't know what he said in private, but that's not a response to why distributism is bad. And you'll go at it again, I'm sure, after this. But I again responded to that with why distributism is bad. Every politician in this country knows that we can't distribute the wealth. Every person in this country knows that we can't distribute the wealth. And having the government restrict how much wealth somebody could have, having the government take somebody's surplus crop, having the government implement any of these things, not only would increase the bureaucracy, but also destroy the fundamentals of this nation, which is liberty.
I would like to rebuttal.
Gentlemen,
I'd
no,
like to
Mr. Long, I
rebuttal.
cannot. I'm going to say something. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you both 2 rebuttals in each subject. We've already had multiple for each of you, and we need to move on. And I'm sorry that you cannot have another rebuttal.
I haven't
but it's
rebutted in
not
this
a-
subject.
it-
I don't
you
believe
know,
I've
you're
rebutted.
not getting to a rebuttal because we're not. This is not a productive little session right here because the American people want to know what you both stand for, and you've clearly made it.
No, I'm going to explain what I stand for.
No, we are not going to rebuttal. I'm going to each give you 2 rebuttals. We are going to move on to the next question. And we're going to start with Mr. Sanders because I've started with Mr. Long multiple times. You say you are a strong supporter of the former Bull Moose Party, Mr. Sanders, and a strong supporter of Theodore Roosevelt's Trust Cluster.
Of Theodore Roosevelt specifically.
Yeah, Theodore Roosevelt. As president in your administration, will you implement policies similar to his in busting huge monopolies and breaking down huge banks that take money from the American people?
100%. That's what I've advocated this entire time. What I'm talking about and what your question is referring to is an oligopoly in which a number of central banks, a number of international central banks, which can be dealt with using America's diplomacy on a national stage, have bled this control of oligopoly down to a few national industries as well. I'm not talking about distributing any wealth. These people gamed the system as it was played, and no one can fault them for that. I think it's quite absurd to do so. What I'm talking about is readjusting the market so that, as Theodore Roosevelt did, as other antitrust presidents have in the past, we can open up again the free market to restart the innovation and excitement in the market, which will spur 100 years again of upward growth and mobility. We saw an accelerated spike of technological advancement, which doubles in acceleration every 2 years, and that doubling, some economists and some technologists are saying, is going up to quadrupling every 2 years. So we're coming up to a point in which we can either open up that acceleration to every person in this country through opening up a market in which the centralized power, in which power has been decentralized, or we can continue this centralized power and allow a totalitarian state to slip in. We saw this same fork in the road in the early 20th century. We are in the early 21st century, and it's time that we choose the right path again at that same fork in the road. It's not about some pseudo-Marxist theory about the increasing government bureaucracy and every aspect of this. That does not deal with or address the core issue of the oligopoly. It's about opening up the free market for new and better entrepreneurs to come into this country, who live in this country, to then build the new ideas to come forth. There needs to be a new generation of entrepreneurs. That's just simply the fact of the matter. There needs to be a new generation of Bill Gates, a new generation of these people who have come up and done great things, and that generation exists in this country now. They need leadership at the top of this nation to open up that free market, to end the power centralized at the top, and to give them the power to do exactly that, increasing true liberty in this country. And might I add, that my vice president and I have done this exact thing already. We've already addressed these issues. My vice president is the person who put forth the greatest Wall Street reform in this community's history. We are going to expand on that. We have a record of actually addressing these core issues and these fundamental issues. I addressed the infrastructure crisis. I addressed the housing crisis. I addressed the Algerian crisis and Chinese expansion in North Africa. There's one person on this stage who's talking a good talk, unless you're talking about distributism, and there's one person on this stage who's done 2 weeks of work after being elected and will do 8 weeks more work if elected as President of the United States.
I would like to say, I want to rebuttal. I'd like to say 2 things, and I want to be heard. I want someone on the stage to hear me very clearly. 1, distributism, the ideology, and you know this very well, Robert. Sure, I did say your name. You can rebuttal after I'm done. You know this very well, Senator Robert, is that distributism has nothing to do with wealth redistribution. It's about an economy of community and small business and economic nationalism. And you know that very well. We've talked about this before. You know what it is, and you know that distributism is not an ideology. It's not socialism. It's actually quite very capitalistic. You know this. You're not admitting it. We've talked about it before. You're not a not so smart person, Robert. You know what ideologies are. You're an intellectual guy, and so you know what it is. You're pretending you don't. The second thing is this. If you want to smash up the vested interests in this country and the establishment in this country, okay? You don't want more people like Bill Gates. You don't want predatory CEOs of international corporations that exploit people in third world countries, exploit people back at home. You don't want that. You do not want the tech oligarchy to be controlling our country. You don't want more people like the tech oligarchy. That's not what we need in this country, okay? Not what we need. And really, Robert Sanders is saying this. We're going to break up the vested interests in this country and whatever, especially more at the beginning than he is now. But if you look at his policies, they're very similar to libertarianism. And that's not... You know what the Koch brothers want more than anything? They want libertarianism. So if you really want to break up the vested interests in this country, the globalists, the bankers, if you want to oppose them more than anything else, you will support the Every Man a King agenda, and you'll support the America First agenda. That's what we're doing. Because here's the thing. Nationalism is about caring for the common good of your country. It has nothing to do with cutting healthcare. It has nothing to do with this idea that a small government will fix everything. Because guess what? It won't. What America needs is a nationalistic government that cares for the interests of its people and that cares for its working class. And we haven't been seeing a lot of that. What we've been seeing a lot of from every single president in this country's history is a whole lot of neoliberalism. And Robert knows it. And he's not advocating for the radical change against the establishment that this campaign is. He's gaslighting, he's straw manning, he's spreading fake news about what this campaign stands for and what my ideology is. And I'll tell you this, my ideology is this. America first and every man a king. What accomplishes those creeds, and he likes to laugh, we do a lot of laughing on this debate, but what he likes to do is just do a lot of laughing. But those are what my creeds are, and that is what I've stood for my entire career.
Right,
and before my time's up, I'd like to say one more thing. My record has been, I would say, probably the most successful Secretary of Labor we've seen in this country's history. 2 very big bills that have done a lot. 1, the Bring Back American Jobs Act, tax credits for 60,000 manufacturing jobs to be brought over from overseas that were outsourced. The second one is the American Workers Act, and that's a very big worker rights bill that Robert probably would have supported back in the day, but he probably now opposes because it's too much big government, since he's the champion against big government.
Thank you for admitting it.
But it's a great bill. The president supports it. The Republicans support it. It's probably going to pass. Very big. But that's what we've been doing as Secretary of Labor. People have said, you're probably the most active Secretary of Labor that we've ever seen. People have said, people in Brett's cabinet have said it. You can ask them yourselves.
You're going off topic with it. We cannot brag.
Thank you.
I was talking about my record. We were allowed to do a little talking about my record.
First of all, anyone can do a nice Trump impression. Anyone can enunciate words very nicely. That doesn't mitigate the fact that distributism is inherently about distributing the wealth. You cannot transition to a you cannot transition
We've already
to
been on this topic,
you
and we have
cannot
to move on.
transition to a system in which I'll read it off again. You cannot transition to a system in which no person would be allowed to accumulate more personal net worth than 1,000 times the average family without distributing the wealth that currently exists in the system. Antitrust actually deals with the oligopoly we have, putting in a rules-based system which need not require a bureaucracy alone, which requires tens of billions of dollars to maintain itself, but instead builds off of the administrative policies we have in place now and actually provides a free market for everybody in this country once and for all.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to move on to the next topic because we're running out of time, and we were on this topic for far too long. We're moving on to our final topic of this afternoon, and it's going to be abortion. Both of you have been proven to be pro-life and very, very, very strong pro-life. Mr. Davy Long, we'll go with you first. In your personal opinion, as you are pro-life, do you believe that Roe v. Wade should be overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States, or shall we put heavy restrictions on abortion instead of banning it entirely?
Well, the current system is actually Roe v. Wade has been overturned. It was overturned by, I believe, President Harry Bennett. So it has actually been overturned. And what we've been seeing now is we've been seeing the provinces regulate abortion. That's why you had Governor John Trump sign the executive order. That's why you've seen other states have a more lax approach. But what I would like to see is this. On the federal level, I believe that we should have certain restrictions on abortion, where really, if it's after 10 weeks and it's not the life of the mother, if it wasn't rape or incest or something very terrible like that, then we will ban it on the federal level. And that's the same thing that Governor John Trump's executive order does. This is a federal level. If the states want to be more restrictive than that, then I believe they should have the right to. But I think we should look at Governor John Trump's executive order, and possibly, obviously, through a law, because abortion doesn't belong through executive order, but through a law, very good law, and protect the lives of the unborn. I understand that many people have different issues on this, but those are my beliefs. I believe that life is important, that life is precious, that the rights of the unborn must be protected in America.
Mr. Sanders, you may go next.
I don't think there is much contention on this issue. I think that, I really don't think there's much contention on this issue.
All right, we're going to. This is the final little portion. This is what I like to call it. I almost say lightning round. This is a one-word answer, and this is just to simplify it for the American people to understand this. We'll start with Mr. Sanders. Are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I'm pro-life.
Thank you. Mr. Longs, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
Pro-life.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Sanders, are you pro-Second Amendment or anti-Second Amendment?
I'm pro-Second Amendment, but I have to say I resent these questions. The American people deserve thoughtful and sensible answers from the highest office in the land, intelligent answers, and I think these demean the office.
Yes, this is just a little session to simplify what was said today, since it was very chaotic.
I think it was actually a good discussion. I think the American people got to see our true policies.
Thank you for your opinion. And same question to you, Mr. Long. Are you pro-Second Amendment? Are you anti-Second Amendment?
Pro-Second Amendment, always have been.
Mr. Sanders, you've made it clear that you're anti-discrimination. Are you pro-billionaires or anti
I'm a capitalist.
Thank you. That sums everything up. Same question to you, Mr. Long. Are you a capitalist?
I am a capitalist. I'm a common good
No,
capitalist.
he is not. Distributism
A
is
common
not
good
capitalism.
It
Restricting
is.
people's right to have as much money as they wish in this system
No.
is not capitalism. We've gone
Hey,
through that
listen, this is
extensively.
rebuttal time. You
We've
know
gone,
this.
we've
This is
gone through
rebuttal
that
time,
extensively,
okay?
and that is
Wow.
the definition of gaslighting.
I'm a common good capitalist. I support capitalism. I support the capitalist system
Anyone can-
within the realm that it meets the needs of the American people. Okay? That's what I support it in. So no, I do not support the vested interests in this country and the hedge funds. And no, that's not what this campaign is about. No.
Like I said, my vice
Thank you.
president and I have addressed the hedge
Gentlemen,
funds
this
through the
is
Wall
long.
Street reform, actually addressed them. No one supports hedge funds. That's not true capitalism. We're opening up the free market
They're
to
good.
true capitalism, not distributism.
Thank you. We are now move on to the closing statement section. Now that we've simplified it for the American people, we will start with Mr. Sanders, and Mr. Long did go first with his opening statement.
The American people in this
You have
debate,
2.5 minutes.
the
Go,
American
Wilman.
the American people in this debate saw quite clearly that Mr. Long and I have a very strong difference of opinion. Mr. Long understands and will, I'm sure, rebuttal this and spend most of his concluding statement rebutting this, but Mr. Long understands greatly the political winds. He's licked his finger and put his hand up in the winds to detect where it's blowing, and he knows that the American people are ready for true liberty. The American people are ready for a system and a return to God, a system in which everyone can get ahead, and a system in which everyone can participate in an open and free market. True capitalism. Anyone can give a good speech. Anyone can give a good slogan. And we've heard great men, the greatest, give the greatest speeches, and we've seen them rise and fall, go up and down. Enough is enough. The American people want real action, real solutions to real problems in this country. They want to see a return to the capitalism which built this country and made it great. That wasn't distributism. That was capitalism. And while it's been said many times that Mr. Long and I have almost no differences, it became clear in this debate to any person from any side of the political spectrum that there is one candidate in this race who is truly committed to instilling a sense of liberty in this nation, returning ourselves to the culture which made this nation great. And there is one candidate in the race who has an extensive record of using their power to its full extent to get that done. There is one ticket, and that ticket is Sanders Cooley. I hope that throughout this debate you saw this ticket's passion, you saw our vision for a better future, you saw through the politicians smearing, the gaslighting, and the undermining tactics of Mr. Long, and I have earned your support in this race. If elected president, it will mark the end of the human era of hate, greed, and exploitation, and once and for all, bring in a nation of liberty, a nation which we can be proud of once again. Restore the culture which we have lost and which was taken from us. The oligopoly will exist no more. Vote Sanders this Friday. Thank you very much.
We've seen in this debate is two different visions for America, that really America is at a crossroads. We can go two different ways. We can go one way, which really involves the same old economic systems, the same old way of looking at politics, the same old buzzwords that are used in politics. All things we don't like dangerous, we call things we don't like radical, and we call things that we do like freedom and liberty. And that's just not what the American people are wanting. What the American people want is this: America first and every man a king. We are going to end the era.
Just words.
4 million jobs to China. I've already worked on this as Secretary of Labor. We're going to do it very forcefully. We're going to bring the jobs home. It doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't matter what the neoliberals will say. We will bring the jobs home. We will no longer be involved in endless war in Algeria and Iraq and Syria. We will bring the troops home. We will stop the bloodshed. It was very terrible that this happened to begin with, and we have to stop it. We have to be very real about what we're going to stop it. We must overhaul our welfare systems and replace them with better programs that I've talked about throughout this campaign. Workfare and family fare. We must promote our family, promote our workers. We are seeing a decline in so much of what's made America great. Urban crime is rising. Birth rates are declining. Divorce rates are increasing. We must ask ourselves, why is this happening? It's because America is having a spiritual crisis. We are losing our way. And the only way that we can bring back our way is by renewing a new spirit of America first and every man a king. We must stop asking ourselves, what can we do for the individual? We must start asking ourselves, what can we do for America? That is real America first, and that is real every man a king. And that is why I started this campaign, because I was sick and tired of the same old way of doing politics under the same old system. We're going to bring so much change, and yes, Robert, maybe it is radical change, but it's against the vested interests, the bankers, the oil companies, and that's just what we're going to have to do. And I have a very great relationship with GOP leadership, and we understand that we don't always agree on everything, and we're going to work together. This is about building national consensus. So what I'm asking the American people is this: don't look at the labels, don't look at the smears, don't look at the straw manning. Do your research about this election. Pay attention to the campaigns, pay attention to the platforms, in which campaign actually has a platform, and make the right decision on who to vote. I am running, and the long Nixon ticket is running because we want to do two things. These are our two creeds: put America first and make every man a king. And I believe that everything in my platform moves towards that goal. That is why I believe you should vote for me. Thank you to the American people for watching this debate, and God bless. And thank you, Senator Robert, for debating me, for touching on very important issues. Thank you, and God bless. And remember, vote for the long Nixon ticket on Election Day.
Two closing statements. This now concludes the first presidential debate between Mr. Sanders and Mr. Long. Thank you both candidates for coming out here today. God bless America. I hereby conclude this debate.